Honorable members, when we rose as a consequence of some disorder in the House, even if there were many avenues available to the chair to act, sometimes a non-action is the best action. And as I said before, my fidelity is not to the right, the left, or the center, but to the Constitution and the standing orders. And I will make rulings fairly regardless of who it offends. So when we rose, the bill before us was the Real Estate Brokers and Agents Bill. Member for Castries Central.
Mr. Speaker, I promise I will try my utmost to be as clinical as I can.
Do more than promise.
Yeah, I promise, Mr. Speaker. I give you my solemn word. As to whether I'm capable of doing that, it's like asking the leader of the opposition to speak the truth. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to make some points here. You know, and it is the kind of disrespectful conduct within this chamber that causes persons on the street to behave the way they behave. Here we have a leader of the opposition in whose favor a ruling probably did not go. Well, not even a ruling, Mr. Speaker. The facts don't support what he's asserting. But then again, Mr. Speaker, you are dealing with a character who has overtly said that the truth is what you believe it to be. So his truth, irrespective of being diametrically opposed to documentation that has been filed in the land registry, he believes his truth is his truth. Mr. Speaker, he referred to your humble servant as El Crapo, a name, Mr. Speaker, El Guapo, yes, a name, Mr. Speaker, that they have been using himself and the United PAC and supporters of the United Workers' Party have been using to describe me. But you know, Mr. Speaker, if it were me that were to refer to him as an expired product or a large white, they would jump on my tail and prepare a list of insults which they say I hurl at members of the opposition without justification. But I'll not call him large white. I will not call him an expired product. In patois, they call large white gros blanc, and it is not necessarily conducive to any pleasantry. I'll refrain. Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition spoke immensely about corruption, and he was going down the road, the Bannon's land, selling a piece of land, Mr. Speaker, selling a piece of land. He asked, where are the tender documents? But the hypocrisy is so glaring, Mr. Speaker. Selling a piece of land, where are the tender documents, Mr. Speaker? I had to smile. Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding you tried desperately to bring him along alignment of reality, he was steadfast in his belief that only the ground floor of the Diamond was sold. That is not true. The document clearly says that the company, which was owned by the government, sold the 5.47 acres of land together with all buildings erected thereon. How can you, any lawyer knows that, you can never introduce oratory evidence. You cannot use words to depart from a written document, the contents of a written document. So if you want what you want to say to be incorporated, write it down. And you have a transfer for the entire thing. And then he says he sold the ground floor. I am not here to give anybody a lecture in the sale of property, Mr. Speaker. But anytime part of a building is sold, that building is registered under the Condominium Act. The main parcel of land retains its original number, its parcel number, and each apartment, each block, each villa, each condo has an annexed number. So you would have block and parcel 1254B, 128, V5, V6, F1, F2. That makes no reference to any ground floor. And what he's attempting to do, Mr. Speaker, is to incorporate a development agreement. The development agreement speaks only to rental. And I just want to read a couple sentences from it. You know, he keeps talking about the ground floor, Mr. Speaker. This was executed on the 11th of March 2021 before Mark Maraj, yes, the name, yeah, Mark Maraj. And it says, development agreement for leased premises, 2 floors, first and second, comprising 78,406 square feet. At paragraph rent, the rent payable by the tenant per month is $4 per square foot, which totals $313,000 a month in this agreement. How can you now tell people that you are paying rent for a floor that you own? I mean, that is so nonsensical that it flies in the face of reasonableness. You know, and he went on and on, Mr. Speaker, about corruption. Mr. Speaker, when he was selling this land, he was selling Diamol, which was valued at the time for $60 million. He sold it for $5 million US, or 13 million. Less than 1/4 of the price. The question is asking me now, in relation to a mere 2 acres of land, was there any tendering before he sold that? Was there any tendering? Was there any tendering on the Cabot lands? Was there? Mr. Speaker, under his watch, in fact, there is a cabinet conclusion that sold land to a minister who was in that cabinet at less than $1 a square foot. And I can call a name because it's a fact to Mary Isaac. I have the cabinet conclusion. Was there tendering? Mr. Speaker, when Timothy Mangal, I can say it because I have the evidence, was manager of NHC, he bought several plots of land at Marigo for less than $2 a square foot. Was there tendering? In Tuya, that same Timothy Mangal, Mr. Speaker, coveted, confiscated, whatever you want to call it, 16 lots of land. Was there tendering? You know, today, you were prime minister. You rented offices. You rented offices from companies in which you have an interest. If that is not insider trading, if that is not nepotism or whatever you want to call it, that is outright corruption, Mr. Speaker. Outright corruption. It is no wonder, Mr. Speaker, it is no wonder in 2017, the corruption index for this country shows that our most corrupt year was 2017 under the leadership of Alan Shastney. The most corrupt year. Before that, we had stability from Stephenson King, from the Labour government. Very stable, we were at 70 to 71%. Then we went down to about 40% under him. Stephenson King steadied the ship. And now, under this prime minister, we're going back up. So if you have to talk about the most corrupt prime minister, it has to be him. Has to be him. And then have the audacity to talk, Mr. Speaker, you know, about lands, and they say they didn't want the land, and the abandoned land is, you know, Mr. Speaker, quite honestly, you know, and brag about his wife has been caught. Mr. Speaker, the DSH, land the man did not sell to Tiwa. He sold some land to Tiwa King next to the airport for less than $4 a square foot. $3 and something cents a square foot with outright title. Why didn't he give it to the people of Vieux Fort? Why didn't he give it to the people of Vieux Fort? $3 and something cents a square foot. Was there tendering? Absolute ownership, Mr. Speaker. What he did not sell, he lists at $1 an acre for 99 years. Was there tendering? You know, I can go on and on. Our biggest project in this country, St. Jude Hospital, over $180 million was expended on that structure, Mr. Speaker. Was there tendering for any one penny? Not a penny was tendered, Mr. Speaker. One of his former ministers in Guy Joseph was permitted to act as prime minister for one day and gave $12 million in direct awards in one day. So if he worked 8 hours a day, he was given $1.5 million in direct awards every hour. You know, let's face it. And today, this man has the audacity to stand and talk on corruption. You have the guts. And you know, Mr. Speaker, 11 days before the last election, 11 days, there was another direct award of $70 million. 70, they were bleeding the bull, Mr. Speaker. A virtual impossibility, except once you had the leader of the opposition and the member for Castries Southeast at the time. They were bleeding the bull. $70 million, Mr. Speaker, of direct award. 11 days before an election. And you know what he did to the people of this country? You know what he did to the people of this country, Mr. Speaker? He would have asked them to pay 1% per day interest in the event of late payment. So, Mr. Speaker, when you accumulate that, you take Cabot, that was worth 30-something million. It was worth more, but you take the pensioners' money, give it to Cabot to buy the land and to help with pensioners. You take that. You take the mall that was valued at 60-something, sold it for less than 25%. You take DSH. You take all the lands, all of them did. You take St. Jude. You know, Mr. Speaker, the corrupt practices in that last administration is glaring. More than glaring. By the way, I need to ask him, but he left. Where are the materials and the equipment for St. Jude? Where are they? They must be in forest here somewhere. You know, taking your supporters to go and confiscate property belonging to taxpayers and pretending they are the high and mighty. You know, and today, and I tell you why, Mr. Speaker, 2017, our most corrupt year. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to belabor this point because the bill before us is a very, very good bill, Mr. Speaker. But I'll say this again, and it was the member for Castries North who was prime minister then, when all of a sudden the same member of the leader of the opposition came to cabinet for us to acquire lands for them to build a hotel, you remember? You remember? And he, you know, acquired lands without the guys giving us one penny. Something, Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, that I really cried about. My heart ached me that we were taking land from the reasonable men and women, firemen, police officers, nurses, down the south, and vesting it in a company that had not given us one penny. You remember that? When you came in, you were prime minister, and when the guys took the land, mortgaged it, and they were about to seize the land, when there was a cry to you, member from Vieux Fort South as prime minister, and you gladly paid the $40-something million for the people to get back the land. Those are the kind of egregious and corrupt deeds that this man and his cohorts have put this country through, Mr. Speaker. You know, Ernst & Young, Where Ernst & Young came from? Where Ernst & Young came from when our loyal civil servants have discharged their duties with such professionalism, Mr. Speaker. All of a sudden you come in and you bring in Ernst & Young, and having paid them up over $50 million to assist you in doing what we pay civil servants to do, and there was never a need for it, they turned their backs because they realized the coffers were getting empty. And he resorted to the very civil servants that he had discarded from the inception. The question is, are people getting paid for those things? Is there a cutback? I don't know. I don't know. But certainly, Mr. Speaker, the Transparency International had every reason to call the Alan Shastey administration the most corrupt in the history of this country. And it's on record, Mr. Speaker. It's on record. So, Mr. Speaker, I mean, even with the real estate and everything else, I do hope, Mr. Speaker, that there ought to be, we should institutionalize that authority that is left with the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Public Service, where a prime minister can rent from companies that belong to himself, his father, and his sisters. That practice must desist, Mr. Speaker. It is either we legislate against it, or we do something to prevent this insider trading. Because had it been America, look what they did that actor. What's the name for insider trading? They jailed her. You all can remember? Nobody can remember? Martha Stewart. She was jailed for insider trading. But today, there are several lists, Mr. Speaker, in the name of companies entered into when this man, the leader of the opposition, was prime minister, between the government of St. Lucia and those companies in which he has an interest. If that is not nepotism, if that is not insider trading, if that is not dishonesty, it qualifies to be labeled corrupt activity, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, that having been said, I support this, and I'm hoping that even with government, there will be some kind, Mr. Speaker, some kind of insulation, Mr. Speaker, between government as an entity and landlords, so that it cannot be that the one who is calling the shots is the Minister of Finance and is the one who enjoys the rental of his building. Something is fundamentally wrong with that, Mr. Speaker. And if persons cannot see that, then something is fundamentally wrong with them. We have a problem. We have a problem, Mr. Speaker. And I'm hoping that when this thing comes on board, Mr. Speaker, we shall be able to get some reprieve. How can you tell me, Mr. Speaker, you sell in a mall that was valued at $60 million. You sell it for less than quarter of the value. Okay? Then, hear this well, the 5 million US that we sold it for, we never received it. It remained as a deposit for the over $200 million that would be accumulated at the end of 16.5 years. We never received a penny. We had to pay to retrofit. It was like signing a document and giving away a government's asset. And today, this very man, Mr. Speaker, wants to speak of corruption. Mr. Speaker, it's autism. You know, range developers came here without a penny and they left with $32 million. You know, Permandu came here without a penny, they left with 13. You took people from Cayman Group. We had to come in this chamber to approve $25 million, over $1 million a month, when our people could have done what we had to do. So, Mr. Speaker, as I said, I'm very happy that this House, with its extreme and acute record keeping, obviously through the teachings and supervision of the Honorable Speaker, is able to furnish this chamber with the deed of sale, the deed of transfer, to which absolutely no reference is made to any ground floor. It is referred to in the development agreement, which is basically a rental agreement at $4 a square foot. But Mr. Speaker, with those few words, one observation I made is that the leader of the opposition had one of his subordinates here, Mr. Speaker, who left him, and it speaks loudly. I saw him trying to tell the leader of the opposition, don't go there, sit down, don't say that. But you know, the truth is what you believe in. He went on and on until the member from Sozel Saltibus felt that in his interest, it is best to disassociate, and he left him in the chamber by himself. This, Mr. Speaker, is a crying shame. Mr. Speaker, I'll end here, but I will continue elsewhere. Thank you.
Minister for Commerce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, a lot has been said this afternoon. Some relevant, some not relevant. But what is relevant is this bill that is before us. And in the chamber are some of the persons who actually worked here, so I really worked on the bill, Mr. Speaker. Again, I want to express my gratitude to Mr. Matron and the members of the Realtors Association, the Attorney General and his staff, the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Commerce, the former legal officer of the Ministry of Commerce, and members of the general public who provided feedback on this bill before us, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the member for Castries Southeast, who brought a perspective of the professionals onto this bill. I think that is extremely important for us. I want to give, tell them, through you, Mr. Speaker, I want to mention that I noted that the member for Miku South attempted to trivialize that bill, Mr. Speaker, but I want to remind members of the purpose of the bill. And I'll repeat that. The purpose of the bill is to provide for the licensing of real estate brokers and real estate agents, and to regulate and control the practice of the real estate business. I believe it is extremely significant in terms of what we are doing to manage the business environment. And I want to give members the assurance that as we receive feedback from the public and as we prepare to draft the regulations, we are still open to any comments that we can include into the regulations. So, Mr. Speaker, with these few words, I want to take my seat, but if you have permission, Mr. Speaker, at the beginning there was something that didn't happen and I need to do so. I had one murder in Soufrière, and I want to take this moment to express my condolences to the family of Hank Monrose, who lost his life. I want to express my condolences to his mother, Miss Paul, and the friends and people of Palmis on his passing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, the question is that the Real Estate Brokers and Agents Bill be read a second time. And now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to provide for the licensing of real estate brokers and real estate agents, to regulate and control the practice of a real estate business and for related matters.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Part 1, clauses 3 to 22.
Licensing of real estate brokers and real estate agents.
Part 1, clauses 3 to 22 stands part of the bill. Part 2, clauses 23 to 44.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Speaker, I made an error.
Pardon? Go ahead. That's okay.
Okay. Licensing of real estate broker and real estate agent. That should have been closed.
That should have been before.
Yes.
That's okay.
Yes.
Part 2, clauses 23 to 44 stands part of the bill. Part 3, clauses 45 to 48.
Obligations of real estate broker or real estate agent.
Part 3, clauses 45 to 48 stands part of the bill. Part 4, clauses 49 to 50.
Complaints.
Part 4, clauses 49 to 50 stands part of the bill. Part 5, clauses 51 to 52.
Miscellaneous.
Part 5, clauses 51 to 52 stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Honourable members, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honourable members, I beg to report that Real Estate Brokers and Agents Bill went through committee stage without amendments. Minister for Commerce.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Honourable members, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Real Estate Brokers and Agents Bill be read a third time and passed. And now put the question. As many as of their opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This Act may be cited as the Real Estate Brokers and Agents Act 2025.
Senior Minister and Minister for Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to present for first reading a bill shortly entitled Electricity.
Electricity.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be presented for second reading at the next or a subsequent sitting of this Honourable House.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, before I move that this House be adjourned, I want to apologize on behalf of honourable members, the viewing public, and to the staff of Parliament and yourself as presiding officer. I cannot say we collectively hold responsibility for the behavior of the Leader of the Opposition. I think we tried our best to ignore him and not to respond. And of course, you would have witnessed he did not pay attention to the ruling of the chair. I also have to say to you, Mr. Speaker, that you showed considerable restraint in not asking the Sergeant of Arms to put him out of the chamber. But we really thought by ignoring him and just allowing him to speak, he would have gotten the message and that he would have just observed the ruling of the chair and allowed the House to proceed orderly. But I think, Mr. Speaker, a few persons have commented that they expect better of the House, and we all expect better of the House, and as members of the House, we all desire to be better, Mr. Speaker, but sometimes I can tell you it takes an extraordinary amount of restraint for you not to answer the repeated untruths and mistruths and misinformation, Mr. Speaker. And surely we would hope that next time we do not have to experience what we experienced today, Mr. Speaker. But having said all of that, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this House stands adjourned. Sine die.
Thank you, Leader of Government, Leader of Government Business. And before I adjourn, the members for Vieux-Fort South and Labrie were not present for my opening remarks, wherein I had advised this Honorable House that I had invited the star of the Youth Parliament debate as my guest here today. She hails from Vieux-Fort North, but I am well aware that she goes to school in Vieux-Fort South. And knowing the member for Vieux-Fort South as I do, when he jealously guards his tooth, he might have taken exception to the Vieux-Fort North reference. So I've appointed the member for Labrie as the referee in this dispute. Having said that, members, the question is that this House do stand adjourned sine die. And now put the question. As many of that opinion say aye, as many as of a contrary opinion say no, sitting adjourned.
All rise.
Eh bien, nous venons au bout de session qui est constituée aujourd'hui. C'est la première session qui est constituée pour l'année 2025. Et c'était Yon Massadi qui était intéressant. La raison était tellement intéressante, c'est puisque la tenue en interruption, et bien, de temps pour deux bouts de session durant temps, il y a des cas discuter, on s'est bien là à ce ça y a des affaires realtors qui c'est loi pour acheter avec vendre propriétaire avec bail comme ça qui était passé par honorable M. Hippolyte, présenté par honorable M. Hippolyte avec durant la discussion à ce la tenant à les casser, et bien, petit mettez, même vous mettez entre membres parlement pour mettre en ville cassé, on est Richard Frederick avec membre parlement pour Sud Miko, on est Alan Chaste qui aussi c'est chef façade opposition. À ce particulièrement à ce ça c'est vente machin vente pour ça il va créer derrière mall à présence Orange Grove il y a présent à différents prix avec comme ça mais speaker fait ça il gagne il baille rouler ben il décider il fait une décision à suivre mais même parlement pour ce qui faut continuer avec speaker qui est constitué aller pour un chaitan sans parler avec nous qui on est ça c'est un finissement nous on est honnêtement il prend responsabilité avec un bout de cette session jeudi il prend apologie à nos gouvernements pour dire qu'il a regretté ça qui était fait là mais il était qu'à faire ça pour faire assurer qu'il bagaille qu'il marche bien. En plus les autres ces discussions qui étaient aujourd'hui c'était session pour Sanoukadi il était passé bill à ce ça il n'a pas passé bill mais il était mis à ce table là c'est Sovereign Wealth Fund c'est un lot fond pour mettre l'argent à ce côté pour à ce réserve pour si en cas la numérisation sans payer mais il peut passer c'est il était mis à ce table là pour discuter après aussi la tenue l'autre qui est virtual asset qui qui était discuté, ça c'est propriétaire virtuel qu'on nous a dit, avec, mais ça qui prend plus discussion aujourd'hui avec c'était child, ça c'est ça qu'on dit justice pour Timamay. Loi ça la plutôt qu'à regarder qui manière gouvernement qu'à protéger Timamay en pays artisan plus avec nous ça été présenté par le Premier ministre mais il y a chaque discussion par différents membres du Parlement à ce stade.
Yes, so just to wrap up quickly, the bills that we passed in the House today was the virtual asset bills. These are bills that just seek to regulate business in the country. There was the security interest in movable property amendment that also was passed. This is a bill which seeks to just exempt small businesses from paying duty exemptions, stamp duty exemptions for small businesses, giving them further support. And of course, as Michael just said, it was the Child Justice Amendment Bill that was passed as well. Just one other thing before I close, there was a statement at the beginning of the House, at the beginning of the sitting, the Honorable Minister for Investment, the representative for Castro South, and he spoke on a new development in the CIP program concerning an injunction brought against the CIP by the member for Castro South. He pledged his government's full intent to fight it because he said a lot rests at stake with this injunction. He says that the economy and the development and roads and everything hinges on that, so his government would be fighting this. All in all, a pretty memorable first sitting for the House, one that many won't forget. It may not necessarily be in the way that we intended it to be memorable, but all in all, as you said, and I just would like to reiterate what the apology, which was good by the member for Castro South, and he did congratulate or commend the Speaker of the House for exercising restraint when the member for Micoud South openly and continuously defied him. So all in all, this is it. We've come to the end of today's sitting. Thank you so much for viewing and staying with us. My name is Virgil Leonti.
Monsieur Michael Gaspard, nous allons remercier un peu pour rester avec nous. Nous avons invité nous ici encore jeudi si dévelé pour session Sénat là qui a discuté, qui a commencé à 10h matin, c'est jeudi si même ça là, avec nous allons présenter ce qui a passé ici en Sénat là. Une bonne soirée et une bonne semaine.